Let's welcome to the stage now executive producer Mark Johnson and star Sam Reid, who plays Lestat de Lioncourt. Mark, since AMC acquired the rights to Anne Rice's iconic novel 5 years ago, you've led the charge in building out this whole television universe that includes Interview with a Vampire, Mayfair Witches, and the upcoming Talamasca. How do you approach this holistically as a producer, and are you aiming to keep them sort of visually and tonally similar, or different vibes?
It's interesting. I've been with AMC. I've had a deal with AMC ever since we did Breaking Bad. So we did, I've done a number of shows, Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul and Halt and Catch Fire and Rectify with AMC. And so we had a pretty good shorthand understanding and friendship. And they approached me with the Anne Rice books. They acquired 18 of them and said, would you be interested? And I don't know if I've ever admitted this before. I had not read Anne Rice, so I immediately did my homework and I said, that's some really great stuff here. And then I almost immediately met Rolin Jones, who was already at work on the pilot for Interview with the Vampire. And those of you who don't know his work, the guy's a genius, and he somehow was able to take his interpretation of Anne Rice, still stay faithful to Anne Rice, and come up with something completely new. And so we had that, and we thought, all right, now let's go to the Mayfair Witches, and which is now in, we just finished airing its second season and just started Talamasca, which is something else entirely. It's a great franchise for me, and I think for the artists, in that it is each book, each series of books is different from the others. So there's very little in common between these shows, and every now and then we'll have a character, we'll visit one from the other. But it's a great for a producer. First of all, she's an extraordinary writer, particularly if you place her at the time when she was writing, for a woman to be writing the stuff that she was writing was pretty extraordinary. But it's just it's been a great opportunity.
And Sam, you know, your presence as Lestat in season 2 is at first this ghostly hallucination of a murdered Lestat who's appearing to Louis, as he grapples with what he's done to you at the end of season 1. And then it leads to this reintroduction of almost the origin story, right, of Lestat as he's brought out on stage in the theater. How did you think about playing that as a memory versus the real Lestat?
Well, I guess the whole way that Rolin has structured particularly these first 2 seasons is through memory. So it was always kind of like an exploration of memory. When we see like the history, I mean, the revisionist version of Lestat in the 1700s, it's through the perspective of somebody who doesn't particularly like him or has some issues with him. And so it was really fun because we got to craft this sort of different version of Lestat, this more like rambunctious kind of romance novel style, silly, thing. Which I think the real Lestat, he's a bit more messy, he's a bit more screwed up. He's not this thing that is seen through the perspective of his exes, which is kind of how we portray him through the first 2 seasons, is like through the eyes of his past lovers, which obviously, have a bit of damage from him.
A little bit of an understatement there.
Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, but when we think about, when you think about memory and how that plays into that, we get so many different versions of what happened and this ever-changing version of what actually transpired. I mean, like, how did you approach sort of playing with that and having the viewer slowly clued in to like, oh, maybe this thing wasn't as accurate as we first thought?
Well, I think it unfolds like that in the script, and this is one of the most amazing challenges that we have when we're working with Rolin's material, because he always has it in his head. So you're playing 5 or 6 different things at any given moment, because we actually know what's plotted out, we know what things are going to be true and what turn out to be false. But when Lestat first appears and he's like a ghost, and we called him Dreamstat, he's like a dream, it was really working with Jacob. He's done this most extraordinary work throughout this whole show, whole seasons, 2 seasons. And I just kind of like, I'm playing I'm playing Louis' psychology. So I'm not Lestat anymore. I am the spectre of Lestat in his mind, but it gives that character a facility to talk to themselves, to be able to have a soliloquy, to them. So you can have that character exist, speak their inner dialogue, and have it reference off their love of the life, basically. And that's what that ghost represents. And we get to show sort of perhaps bits that you didn't see in the first season in their relationship, like softer, more intimate, kind of more questioning, searching conversations that are not so rambunctious and told through the eyes of this angry ex. But then as you progress and you get to the end where you see the real version of Lestat, I mean, the way that they've plotted the show, certain things have happened that we haven't seen yet to that character. So he's also kind of like living off the echoes of those experiences that we haven't yet shot and have only discussed and I've seen up on a board, but I've never actually had the opportunity to play. So it's kind of, it's a weird thing when you're approaching a very large, expansive character arc, but very joyful and challenging, yeah.
And the tone of this show is so interesting as well. Mark, it's absurdist, it's gothic horror, it has this very agile ability to swing from comic to dark, a total hairpin turn. How do you set the tone for the cast and crew so that everybody's on the same page? And how much do you sort of let them play?
That's really in Rolin's hands, and he's just he is a master of, well, Sam will tell you, he's just a master of giving you direction, or giving the director's direction for characters to interpret what he's written, but at the same time you have all the freedom to work within that, and it's almost like he describes the parameters and then watches you perform within them.
Tone is a really complex thing to get right in this show because it is actually funny. Like, I think it's a comedy personally. Like there are some like real ripper jokes in it, and but at the same time it's very, very traumatic and very bloody and very heightened. Like, there's a lot of screaming, a lot of crying, and so when you read that on the page, you as an actor, you're a bit like, okay, where do we pitch this? How do we get it? And we have a lot of conversations with Rolin, but really the most valuable thing that he does is let me just play a piece of music that I'm thinking of what's going to play. So then he'll play this extraordinary piece of classical music, or he'll play this really sort of surreal jazz beat piece that you'd think would never work in a scene like that, which completely gives you a point of direction to play. You think, oh, okay, this is we're going slightly off the wall here. We don't have to follow what you would expect to see, which allows people to make choices that are brave, I think. And he is a very brave filmmaker, television maker. There's a lot of second guessing through the process. There's a lot of anxiety and angst and a lot of discussion, but when he makes a choice, Rolin really makes it very firmly, and we all just have to say, okay, we're really going to do that? And he's like, yeah, we're doing this. Okay, we're doing that. And he said, don't be afraid to make people angry. Don't be afraid to make people feel something when they're watching it now, but in 10 years, you're going to be proud of it. So it's a good ethos.
Mark, season 1 was in New Orleans. Season 2 is in Paris. It's a very lush, yet sometimes severe and dark setting. How did you think about incorporating the location and the history of it being against the backdrop of World War II into things?
Well, New Orleans was a given the origin of the story. Reading the first book, we are actually at one point going to shoot season 1 and season 2 as a single season, and we realized that New Orleans had a large story to tell and a completely different, I think thematically, a completely different side. What happens is that those of you familiar with it, at one point Lestat is no longer with us in theory, and Louis and Claudia go off to Paris, which we actually ended up shooting in Prague. And then we ended up with a couple of weeks of additional stuff in Paris. But we needed, it was a European search for, quite frankly, more vampires, for family. It was a quest for finding family. And with this newfound family, and the specter of Lestat traveled across the Atlantic with them.
Sam, this show has such a dedicated and loyal fan base. How does that factor into your thinking when you're approaching this? Do you ever feel pressure from that? Do you when you're living up to the books, or what readers' book version of Lestat is in their heads? Yeah,
it's a lot of pressure. I've grown to love it, the pressure. When we started, it was extreme pressure because obviously the film was so popular, and I thought, Tom Cruise is like, it was, wow, that's what I'm going to try and fuck. It's just so. But the good thing is that we're adapting all of the books. We have the whole breadth of the Vampire Chronicles of Anne Rice's work to kind of adapt. So you could just kind of go back to the source material. But the best thing about there being an existing fan base, not just on the movie, but really from the books, is that there's so much material that you can find. It's a bit frustrating now because we have been absorbed into that material. So when you go looking for fan art or something, you end up finding a photograph or picture of yourself like nude on a bed, But the better things are, finding those early works when you could see. And I had that in my trailer and in my room when we were shooting season 1. I just had all of the fan art that I could find, every picture of Lestat that somebody had drawn from the 1970s. I had just found and put it up on my wall and was looking at it, going like, this is what this character is to all of these people. It's a very important thing. When you're dealing with characters that exist already in the psyches of an audience, it can be very personal, and to take that away from someone means you've lost them from the beginning, because they're there to watch their show. It's their show. We make it for them, and it belongs to them. So yeah, it's a lot of pressure, but I've grown to like it, and we actually have a lot of fans who come and visit us on set, and Rolin is amazing. He seems to kind of like meet everyone and invite them to events, and so we do get to meet a lot of people and hear notes and hear ideas, and it's great. It's like it's kind of like a feedback loop. Yeah.
And going back to the portrayal on screen, there's so much telepathy in the storyline. So there are a lot of scenes where I imagine your scene partner and you were just looking at each other, but there's a lot that you're communicating. How challenging is that for you as an actor?
It's really hard. It's really, really hard, because it's like a classic Rolin Jones. He has 2 things to do at the same time, or sometimes 4 things to do at the same time if you're flying or dancing around at the same time. But the first season with the telepathy was really challenging, and coming back to it in season 2, I had come up with quite a harebrained scheme to make it easier. So we record the scene, pre-record the scene, the telepathy scene, and have tiny little earpieces. And I do this when I play music as well. I have a tiny little earpiece in my ear, so that I can hear like the piano, or if I can hear like the tempo being played. But we pre-record the scene, so you can do the whole scene. At the same time, you're hearing the conversation playing in your head, so you know when to like hit the beats or when you're looking. And that has helped. It does send you a little, I don't want to say schizophrenic, but slightly mad, because you are kind of like feeling 2 worlds in your mind. But that's turned out to be the easiest way to like have a whole scene, of telepathy. Yeah.
That's so interesting. And again, especially the tonal shifts too. It just feels like you're being pulled in so many different directions, especially again between the absurdist and the dark. And I'm thinking of that scene in the season finale where you and Louis reunite, and there's a big passionate speech, and in the middle you're like, Siri, pause.
Yeah, I mean, but that's what I mean. I think it's funny. I think the show is funny. I think you have to play. The circumstances are absurd. Like, you just have to let them exist. You don't have to push it. The best thing to do when you have extraordinary circumstances is commit to it like it's real. You just have to make it real. And I think we've always done that from the beginning. Is that, okay, vampires are real. This is real. So, you know, like, that's the problem. How are we going to solve it? Problem with a character like Lestat is, like, he's so extreme because he has no filter on the way that he can process his emotion. So, like, if he starts to get angry, he's just gonna, like, let it out. He just doesn't control himself, which means he can do more extreme things. But it's funny, like, it's ridiculous. You can step back and laugh at a person. But also, like, that scene. That's like a combination of Jacob and I working together, you know, for 3 years, and we only shot that twice. I think they used the first take that we shot of it because we were running out of time. It was also the middle of winter in Prague, so we shot it on a soundstage in Prague, and it was like this, you know, set that was falling apart. It's blacked off behind, but behind the curtain is snow, like it's snowing in Prague, and there are these, you know, stagehands with leaf blowers blowing leaves into our face and wind, and people like shaking the set. And, you know, it was just this mad situation. So you just have to kind of really trust your scene partner. And, you know, Jacob and I really trust each other. And Jacob's, like, just so extraordinary in this role. It's so easy to just kind of, you know, disappear when you're working with him, that you can do really silly stuff. Wake up in the morning and think, oh, God, what did I do yesterday? But in the moment, you can just go there, you know, and feel uninhibited and uninhabited by yourself, I suppose, yeah.
And, okay, Mark, I got a question. Maybe this is just for me. A major part of the story hinges on a play starring one of the vampires, Santiago, who's played by the incredible Ben Daniels. So it gives us a play within the show. And it's written by the vampire Sam Barclay, called Enduring for Guido. And now Samuel Beckett's full name is, of course, Samuel Barclay Beckett. Are you telling us that it's canon that Waiting for Godot was written by a vampire?
We have a couple of other people up here who may have some history behind them. Yes, we populated Paris in particular with one or two figures who were pretty well known.
And then lastly, you know, we have a lot of our audience members who live and work in this industry. And, you know, it's been a really tough time for Hollywood over the last couple of years. I want to close out by asking each of you, what gives each of you hope as you move forward here?
Hope in general or hope for the industry?
Well, a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, right?
Gosh, it's hard to have hope, isn't it?
But I guess particularly for the industry.
Wow, what gives us hope? You know, gosh, do we have to have it? I actually think in times of great adversity, there has been extraordinary art that has appeared from it. Like, you know, I don't want to get existential, but what is the meaning to anything? I mean, there's so much suffering everywhere, and to see it continue and also, you know, come right up to our front door now on a daily basis, you know, what's happening in the news and what's happening in people's lives and people that you know, and also the fact that people that you know personally can have such a polarizingly different point of view to you, and you can find yourself in extremely intense conversations with people that you have shared a house with and shared your life with, and feel so alienated, you know, by that. Like, it's a very hard time to have hope. But I suppose if, you know, all we can do is hopefully say that the arts do communicate with people in a way that allows them to see themselves in a place that they might not have imagined previously. So if you can see yourself, and that's what's one of this show does, which I think I feel really proud of, is that people feel seen. And if you feel seen, then you're able to, find a new community or find a space where you can, see other people, and then we can get out of this somehow, or at least build something new. I mean, that's the only thing that I can dare to say about hope in 2025, is that hopefully art can help us build new things.
On a much more prosaic level, look, our most romantic impulse is to be told a story or to tell a story. And we continue, no matter how we're being told the story, if we're listening to it, watching it, what we're watching it on, stories are going to continue. And there just aren't enough, and there's so many talented people. I go on our set, and just surrounded by people who are artists and who have something to tell and have a sort of a beautiful and unique way of doing it. So I think we're just sorting ourselves out. It's an economic situation that will solve itself, and I'm confident that we will continue here in Southern California, continue to make or originate some of the very best art, certainly filmic and television art there is.
Hear, hear. Thank you so much for your time, Sam and Mark. Really appreciate it. It was lovely.